The Buccaneers of Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean ride can be heard to sing, "Yo ho ho, a pirate's life for me." It makes for a catchy lyric, but it was probably written by someone who had no idea how unbelievably disgusting and disease-ridden pirate ships really were. Inadequate nutrition and constant exposure made the sailors highly susceptible to illnesses, and the confined living spaces and lack of access to clean water allowed those illnesses to spread around the ships quickly. Today, we're going to take a look at what hygiene was like on pirate ships. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other pirate-related topics you would like to hear about.
Arr! Now all hands ye wash. We've got pirate hygiene approaching.
Pirates were famous for a lot of things, but having great dental plans wasn't one of them. This is probably because most pirates didn't do anything to care for their teeth, and if they did, it was likely to be something like chewing on a wooden stick. They didn't invent the practice. Such chew sticks actually date all the way back to the ancient world and remained a fairly common means of teeth cleaning as late as the 18th century. Of course, finding chew sticks at sea was no easy task, so even a pirate who was conscientious about dental health would often go long stretches without even the most basic oral care. On a ship, fresh water was saved for cooking and drinking, so when it came to bathe, your average pirate probably just jumped into the ocean for a quick rinse. Despite the ease, taking a bath would have been a fairly rare endeavor. This was for a number of reasons. First, salt water isn't great for the skin, and accidentally ingesting it could make a man sick. Second, leaving the ship could be dangerous. Pirates tended to believe in sea monsters, and it was impossible to tell if one might be lurking in the depths beneath the ship. And third, pirates weren't very good swimmers. Despite what pretty much every pirate movie ever made would have us believe, most captains didn't wear fancy waistcoats and breeches. Rather, they typically dressed for comfort and practicality. And could you blame them? They were likely to be wearing the same clothes for months at a time. Clothes that would be typically soaked in their own sweat and blood, and occasionally the blood of other people. If clothes were cleaned at all, it would be when the pirates were on land. Even then, the wash would only be done with water or salt water. Soap was unlikely to be involved. In the 19th century, whaling was a massive industry. Whaling ships often carried valuable resources, and this made them common targets for pirates and privateers. Commercial whalers on the Azores Islands had been processing whale blubber since the 10th century. It was the basis for things like oil, lubricant, and most importantly for our purposes here, soap. Pirates likely seized blubber from the whalers to make these items for themselves. That being said, making your own soap from whale blubber is not fun. Processing the animal is incredibly difficult and by all accounts smells overpoweringly awful. Although toilets go all the way back to the 16th century, they didn't have any on pirate ships. Instead, they had a head, which was really just a plank of wood with a hole cut through it that emptied into the water below. Why was it called the head? Well, the plank was usually located at the bow or the head of the ship. Sailors called the plank by its location on the ship, and the name stuck. In fact, head is still a fairly common term for a bathroom on a ship, and in other locations. Interestingly, Royal Navy ships had proper facilities, but only for officers. The common sailors had heads, just like the pirates. And in bad weather, they probably sometimes used a pot instead of the plank, and then just threw the filth overboard later. Movies like the Pirates of the Caribbean make the pirate life seem like non-stop adventure, but that's just because they leave out all the cleaning. Yep. Pirates spent a great deal of their time washing their ships, inside and out. Decks had to be scrubbed, repairs had to be made, and blades and sidearms had to be cleaned. Every sailor had assigned chores to carry out, and the work was not easy. There was also periodic maintenance. The same way you have to take your car in for an oil change every so often, every few months a pirate would have to go find a place to careen their ship. This refers to tilting the ship onto its side, allowing the bottom to be scraped of barnacles and mollusks. The process prevented the ship from becoming infected with shipworm, which are also sometimes known as the termites of the sea. As you might have guessed, table manners were not a big priority for pirates. The famous Captain George Roberts once described a pirate crew he witnessed at a meal as like a kennel of hounds, snatching and catching the victuals from one another. On a ship, foodstuffs had to be resistant to spoiling, so the selection tended to be pretty basic. Dried meats, hardtack, and alcohol were common, but they didn't exactly constitute a balanced diet. Therefore, pirates frequently supplemented those staples with turtles, birds, and whatever other protein sources they might happen upon. A wide variety of items, including garlic, olives, eggs, cabbage, fish, oysters, and even snakes, might be thrown together in a stew. Seasoning and spices were also likely to be included in the mix, but they weren't always readily available. The sum total of all this was a diet mostly lacking in nutrients, particularly vitamin C. This led to outbreaks of scurvy, and the effects were extreme. A sea surgeon named William Close wrote that the gums would be rotted even to the very roots of their very teeth. The cheeks would become hard and swollen, the breath would become pungent, and finally, the teeth would loosen and fall out. Well, isn't that a nice visual? On pirate ships and non-pirate ships alike, scurvy was common for centuries. By some estimates, upwards of 2 million sailors died of scurvy between the 15th and 18th centuries alone. An unknown surgeon on a 16th century English ship recorded his own symptoms after contracting the disease. He described rotted gums, which gave out black and putrid blood, and legs that turned black and gangrenous. It was so bad, he was forced to cut away his own skin in order to release this black and foul blood. He also, apparently, had to cut his gums, which he described as livid and growing over his teeth. When he pulled away the decaying flesh, black blood flowed from his mouth. And if you think this story can't get any worse, then brace yourself. Because the next thing he did was rinse his mouth and teeth with the closest thing he had to antiseptic at the time. His own urine. Did you hear that? Somewhere R. Kelly just liked this video. Anyway, scurvy was bad, but at least it was possible to recover from it. The same couldn't always be said of other conditions, like dysentery. Fluxes and fevers were also common on account of the putrid water, close quarters, and a general lack of hygiene. Pirating was incredibly risky, so ships had to be prepared to deal with all sorts of medical emergencies. To this end, some pirate crews carried their own surgeons. The services of these professionals were often procured by force. Failing that, novices might be tasked with learning surgical procedures. One such ship surgeon was John Devon, who worked for the infamous Captain Henry Every. He stayed on with Every even after he was officially proclaimed a pirate by the English Privy Council in 1696. 2 years after that, Devon himself would be tried for piracy and acquitted. Archibald Murray was a ship surgeon who served 3 different pirate captains, starting with Captain Howell Davis in 1718. In 1723, Cole Wyeth was the surgeon on a ship that was commandeered by the pirate Edward Lowe. Wyeth served under Lowe and then continued on after the ship was taken back by its original captain. In 1717, the notorious Edward Teach, also known as Blackbeard, seized a ship called La Concorde, which he would famously rename Queen Anne's Revenge. It carried 3 surgeons whom Blackbeard kept as captives. They were presumably still aboard the ship a year later when he attacked Charleston, South Carolina. It's not clear how often pirates shaved their faces, but there is evidence that the surgeons on pirate ships may have doubled as barbers. Surgery often requires shaving an area of the body, which would give the surgeon experience with using the razor on a ship that rocks and sways with the motion of the sea. A 17th century treatise called The Surgeon's Mate even describes ship surgeons who had multiple razors and scissors of various sizes precisely so he could give haircuts. Being a pirate was a dangerous way to make a living. Accidents, brawls, and battles were all common and likely to result in wounds, burns, illnesses, and all other manner of medical problems. As such, a pirate ship typically had a medicine chest which would contain salve, ointments, and instruments for performing surgery, like amputations. When the wreck of Blackbeard's famous ship, Queen Anne's Revenge, was found off the coast of North Carolina, its medicine chest still contained scissors, mortars and pestles for preparing ingredients, as well as screws that were likely used for bloodletting. According to the famous, albeit dubious, textbook, The General History of the Pirates, by Captain Charles Johnson, Blackbeard acquired these medical supplies via extortion. The book claims that the legendary pirate attacked every ship in Charleston, South Carolina, until the government finally agreed to give him the medical supplies he needed. Diseases like syphilis were common at sea, and when Blackbeard's medicine chest was unearthed, one of the instruments found inside was a urethral syringe used to treat that condition. Fevers, smallpox, and measles were also fairly routine conditions. Insects and vermin were everywhere. John Esquemeling from Henry Morgan's late 17th century ship recorded gnats of various sizes, including ones that exceed not the bigness of a grain of mustard, and bite so sharply upon the flesh as to create little ulcers therein. As fun as that sounds, it was just the beginning. Lice, fleas, rats, and even bees could infest ships. In such cases, health professionals of the time were prone to recommend fumigation. Other daily risks might include dehydration, sunburn, heat exhaustion, hypothermia, frostbite, and of course, any wounds and trauma caused by swords, gunshots, and cannonballs. So, do you think you would have enjoyed the pirate life? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.